Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Solutions podcast. And this month I am with Braden Beckius, who calls herself, I'm pleased to hear, a radical free agent. So here we are, a solutionist and a radical free agent. And, we both have realized that we have to reinvent ourselves in this time because, we don't fit in the system. We're on the fringe of what is normal, where people fit into a box and have an official title. So hi Braden, it's great that we can have a chat about what does it mean to be a radical free agent. So how did you come up with that title? How did you when and where did that happen?
Well, first, thanks for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. It did take me a while to actually come up sort of that framing. I remember the originally I always sort of wanted something that maximizes my sense of agency, sort of like how I perceive myself, and not sort of impose li false limitations, like mental limitations on like what I consider to be like the boundaries of what would constitute my work, because it would be incredibly arbitrary considering how entangled everything is related to like the meta crisis and whatnot. So I remember originally I was like, I want to be like a mafia fixer, but like for the meta crisis. But it's sort of like, acting outside the boundaries of the normal, like the person you go to when you need like when they say like, oh yeah, I know a guy and like they do the thing and it's like I can do that for you, no problem, like whatever. So it's just like it's very empowering and it also it's very flexible, it's very fluid. But obviously I didn't want to use that term because obviously I don't want to be associated with like a mafia or um but I did sort of, I guess. Yeah, I was thinking like a free agent as not a freelancer. Um, like people say like, oh, you're freelance, but it's like it's not about like who's hiring me. Like it's not about, oh, like my relationship isn't like to my work isn't about who's hiring me at any specific moment. It's more about like um fundamentally being able to dictate where I go and why because of like I have sufficient reason to go there. So ultimately I kind of was like put together sort of the core components of like I want to be very much free in what I do and where I go. I want to maximize my own agency within the system and building the new systems. And then also like fundamentally going back to radical, meaning like at the roots. Um, Originally like it kind of sounds like free radical, but then I was like, maybe just reframe it like, radical free agent, like more discreet. And yeah. So that was sort of my process of thinking, but it kind of evolved over time because it took me forever to identify how it's sort of like my mode of operation and like how I want to operate.
Mm.
Yeah, because people ask me, are you a consultant? Are you a contractor? It's like not necessarily.
I can be all of those things.
I can be whatever I want.
Yeah, yeah. And that's it, isn't it? About us kind of fitting in, adapting to the circumstance of whatever is needed at the time. And having that
Yeah.
fluidity to say, okay, yeah, what do you need me to do right now? How can I best serve?
Yeah.
Because we know that there's a lot going on. And so we have to be like super adaptive of whatever. And so we, just a bit of background how we met. So the Southeast Climate Alliance, which we had our annual meeting, and Braden then was there. You launched your new bioregional organization there. So what's your focus with what you're doing in Kent?
That's a very broad, like that's a question I could go many, many ways with. So, like you mentioned, the Wilden Bioregional Learning Hub, that is sort of very nascent. People who live in the broader Weald, which is a geological bioregion of Kent, and I think also goes into Sussex and a bit into, yeah, so a lot of the southeast. It's sort of bringing people together across the bioregion to look through a bioregional lens and co-create the infrastructure necessary to like um, educate create like bioregional learning and education, monitor flows of like water, carbon, food systems across the world, and also bringing finance to all the different projects that are happening for different watersheds, different like nature restoration efforts and things like that. So it's like looking very holistically. So that's specifically what the Wheelden Bioregional Hub is going to be focusing on, but that's sort of just one in terms of my like the way I engage you asked across Kent, like I guess I don't really look at it that administratively, but that's just one of the many sort of groups that I'm a part of or that I interact with regularly that I try to connect together, weave efforts together to sort of mutually reinforce and amplify their respective efforts into something bigger than the sum of their parts. Um, yeah. So if you want to go into any specific one, I was like, I could go through all of them, but I feel like it's too much and I would just be rambling forever. So
But that idea of the kind of mapping that in each region, for us to really be resilient for whatever comes to us in the future, it was something which I like to kind of start with asking. I say to people, do you know where you would get water from? If one day, God forbid, there's no water comes out your tap, and there's a rush on the supermarket and all the local shops and all the bottled water's gone, then what?
mm,
If we don't know that first step of where would you go, wherever you live, it's critical that we know where we would get water from. And then we
mm,
need to know how good quality is that water? Because if you're about to depend on that for you and your family, do you know how to filter it? And that kind of question and that starting of to be resilient humans that are not, absolutely tied to a system that is failing, collapsing, we need to know about where we're getting water from, where we're getting food from, where, these kind of elements that, keep us alive, basically. So, this what I'm hearing with this kind of bioregional work is really looking at that of how we can also kind of localize what we're doing. So I don't know if you'd add on to any of that. What?
yeah, yeah. Like the bioregional perspective and approach at its core is about humans organizing ourselves the way that the earth organizes us. And I really like that framing because it includes so many different facets of our existence in sort of one phrase. So, like for example, um, looking through the lens of geology, so like the Weald and sort of like the chalk, like sediment of the Downs, right? That goes all the way into France. Like that's one way to look at it, and then also hydrologically, so river systems, catchments, how does all this water flow together? And then ecology, the different life, flora and fauna that live in a specific place, and also human culture, like the sort of grounded historical perspective of human interaction in place. So like you asked the question of, where does your water come from? I remember when I first joined the design school for Regenerating Earth, which is if you've heard of it, it's a platform that brings people together to their goal is to create a planetary network of bioregional learning centers. So bringing people together who are doing bioregioning work all around the world to share information and connect. And yeah, it's that was the first question that they asked in like the how to organize your bioregion webinar was like, where does your water come from? Do you know where your water comes from? And I was just like that. I was just like, oh my God, I've been blind my whole life. Like it just sort of like it just took that like you realize how withdrawn and removed you really are from the world that you depend on, and we sort of abstract ourselves away from it, thinking like this is over there, and by the time any water or food gets to us, it's gone through so many layers of processing and yeah, through endless supply chains. And
And the more you know
Yeah.
about rivers, which we're all, and if you haven't watched Dirty Business, then I recommend everybody to watch it because it is a total expose in the UK of what's happening to our water systems. And so the water that comes out of the tap where I live comes from the River Rother, which joins the River Arun, and there's Southern Waters Processing Plant. And
Mm.
the amount of sewage that's going into the River Rother and all the dogs which walk through the RSPB wetlands and go swimming in the river, covered in their, tick and flea treatments, and so all these different chemicals that are ending up in the river is basically what we end up drinking. And I think that sometimes people need to be, have a good hard look at that and say, this is it. Water doesn't, it's not just coming out of thin air when it comes out of your tap, it's coming from our rivers. And
Yeah.
so understanding that, yes, when we're talking about reducing water use, it's also because how it impacts the watersheds, the riversheds.
Mm.
And there was just the other day, it was amazing in our local village hall, the Rivers Trust came and gave a talk. And Amy Fellows, I'll give a good shout out to her because she just gave the most brilliant talk. And she said, when we think of a river, we think of the blue ribbon that runs through the map. And actually, a river is not just that blue line. It's the whole rivershed that surrounds it. But what humans have done is that we've banked them, we've narrowed them, we've turned them into these straight lines where then what happens is when they do flood out onto agricultural fields, they can't get back into the river. So this trouble with farmers who are alongside rivers because of this, that they might think that, oh, that's a good idea to kind of like bank it up and stop that movement, but when it does, because it can't stop, if water wants to go somewhere, it will go there. So yeah, these kind of conversations really about where does your water come from and how can we all together really start looking at our watersheds and asking what we can do about them. So yeah, and so I know you've kind of touched on and worked a little bit with the rights of nature and the lawyers for nature and that kind of work. So what's your interest there?
Um, so in terms of I just to quickly respond to what you just said about the reframing of the river as not just the blue line, it's like the entire catchment. The source of the water where I live is actually an aquifer, so like groundwater. So that is also like part of that system where if you're looking at if you're getting really philosophical, but it's also not philosophical, it's also very practical. It's like you look at the entire water cycle of the rain in a specific area, the clouds above, like the water that gets stored underground, that gets stored in plants and animals and taken in to support their life. So it's like you're looking at an entire hydrological system and the ecological system that it supports. It's like if you really want to look at the rights of nature, like where do I don't want to say draw the lines, but like what is the membrane? Maybe that's a bit more organic. Then what like looking at those flows and the entirety of like where water, all the different forms it takes and how it supports everything else. Yeah, so like for the rights of nature, right now I'm looking very much at the River Darrant. There's a lot of organizing going around the River Darrant, so it's actually really nice to kind of cohere and catalyze that a bit, where it's like maybe pushing a bit more for like ambition in terms of like making the rights of the river, the framing it as the rights of the river, making it like the rights of like the catchment ecosystem or the rights of the entire catchment, where it's like looking at that whole hydrological system as, but then you also have that's connected to the Thames and the Thames system, like, and the Cray also flows into the Darren. So you have all of these interdependencies and flows. Um, and that's why that's also part of like a bigger group called Living Thames, which is another bioregional organizing group that looks at the Thames and all of its tributaries as a system as a whole, and then coordinates around that and builds community around it. So there's many different layers to like when we're looking at the rights of nature and the rights of a river, it's like it's also like looking at the relationships between like how do these ecosystems interact with other ecosystems. And it's like if you impose some type of hard boundary on, the way that the current system works now, it's like you have a district or county boundary, and then every type of legislation that exists in one side may not exist on the other side, but it doesn't make any sense. So, like for example, the Darent is part of two different jurisdictions. Like, so there's the Seven Oak District Council has the upper part of the river, and then the lower part of the river that goes into the Thames is Dartford Borough Council. And currently, there's like a sort of broader motion to acknowledge the rights of the river that was passed last year for Seven Oaks District. And right now, the Dartford Borough Council, there's a campaign going on there by a Green Councillor, Laura Eady, to put those same protections in the Dartford Council. But it's just the fact that like if any one half of the river, it's just one flowing thing, but you can't just say, oh, we're only going to do it on this side, and then whatever happens on that side is, it's not our business. It's all part of the same whole. You can't like pretend that it's, yeah. Um,
But it's
yeah, and
just
I
funny. It's like with the whole bioregional, it's just helping people move away from these lines, these invisible
mm.
lines that we have drawn for counties, for nations, for countries, these lines on maps, which are so restrictive. And that's a great example with, rights of river, where you can have half of the river can have rights and the other half can't.
Yeah. And it also translates into how we perceive ourselves as humans and our identities and like the way that we get sort of like attached to them. Like there's so many, like if you look at you as an individual, your relationship to like everything happening in the world around you, there's so many overlapping sort of nested systems that you're a part of, and you can sort of orient your identity around to the extent where it no longer becomes something so like I don't know, like it's not no longer a cornerstone to you. Like some people see themselves very much around like their national identity, like they feel, very Scottish or very American or very, um, but there's so many more dynamics to that. Like what place did you grow up in? Where have you, like which people have you interacted with? Like what living systems have you interacted with? Where does your food come from? Like all sorts of different questions that you could ask yourself that sort of like add so much color and dimension. Um, and once you sort of look at all the different nested and overlapping systems that you're a part of, you sort of you like for at least for me, I understand my identity as sort of like the interaction between all those parts and not having any one part overpower the other. And that goes from like me as an individual to like my local community, but also to like all the different bioregional sort of systems that I'm a part of and the planetary system, because we are all ultimately indigenous to Earth. And it's important to look from that perspective as well as all the different, perspectives in between.
Mm. It's a great remembering, isn't it? That we are the sum of everyone we've met, everywhere that we've walked, every tree we've met, and just it's the more than human world that has affected us without us even knowing it. Those awesome views that may have really made you feel something. And when we kind of really look at our life all the way to where we stand today, and remember that we are who we are because of so many things. And we can forget that, can't we? We can just, yes, we can be right here, right now, and forget that lineage behind us that has created the person that we are. And for many people, like with this, national identity, which can be really, really strong, they haven't, necessarily left the country. They are not really interested in other countries, and so those of us that have been blessed to be able to see that there's a whole world out there, and respecting other people's kind of cultures and beliefs and identities. And I know with a lot of indigenous people, if you ask them where they come from, they will say the mountain or the river. That's where they come from. They don't come from a name that's actually not been around for that long. And talking about names, yesterday I learned that the Weald comes from the word wild. Kind of makes
That makes
sense.
sense.
But yeah. So that was a good little a lesson yesterday. We keep learning things. We live from these areas and we don't question where did that get its name from. So I think that's, with this kind of bioregional understanding of how did that river get its name? How did that mountain get its name? What are the stories and the myths around, our areas? Because that also weaves in to place, this sense of place. And how can we help people re-indigenize themselves to where they're living at any one time? Eating
Yeah.
eating native foods is a good place to start, isn't it? It's like when we eat something that is growing outside our back door, immediately we've taken into our body that sense of place.
Yeah. It's also an interesting question because there's so many like a lot of conversation right now about, people who are from other places and then go to a new place. It's like, well, do you really belong to place? Like, is any who are the real quote unquote indigenous people of any given place? But I mean, these are all processes. Like this is just a continuous on unfolding process of life that just constantly evolves. And yes, like certain people will show up and certain people will leave, and it's just this flow. Like as an American of European descent, I'm just an amalgamation of different families and people who packed up their lives, and there's a lot of colonization in that, but then they established roots in a new place, and then that place then became like combined with their experience and sort of European identities to create this new experience. And like there's like I used to not feel very connected to any one given place. Um, and I still kind of don't because I see everything as connected. It's sort of like wherever I am right now, that's where like I'll focus on that connection, but also not blinding myself to like all the interdependencies of like what that actually means. Like I feel like when Brexit was originally voted on and sort of what was sort of sold was we're just gonna cut everything off, like put these very strong boundaries around the UK, and then every certain people will stay in, and then everyone else will stay out, and that will just be it. But it's like when Brexit actually happened, people realized how intricate and how entangled everything was, and how many interdependencies they had, like how much of their food comes from abroad, how much of like how many of the people they know have roots from other places and how like that are very dear to them, and like oh like these are questions that I didn't have to like think about before. Um
And
so
there's
it's yeah.
how many species migrate? It's
Oh,
like
that's so funny.
there is a constant movement, and some are epic migrators, and do these like huge long distance migrations every year, and it's happening more and more. Many species are migrating and moving, and that is just part of the earthly experience of we have to move, and all species have to move depending on whether they can get food or not. So yeah, I think this idea of staying and what does it mean to be indigenous to place. But when we look at indigenous people from an unbroken lineage, which sadly there's not enough of, and they are really grounding something very important in that remembering, and we can't imagine what it would be like for your great 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 grandparents to be buried where you live and to have been born where you live. And when we think about that you were born on this piece of land, and so were your parents and your grandparents and your great grandparents, and they're all been buried here, they've all that deep connection for land, you truly must feel, which is they will fight for that land, because it is so much a part of them.
Mm.
And for us, who have just not got a lineage sense of place. I mean, how many people do we know that even grandparents lived in the same village? We are so disconnected to any one place because we've moved around so much. And I think that that's pretty much in all of us that have this sense of disconnection. So what you're saying about how it's so important that wherever we are, we just deeply connect to that place, wherever we hang our hat.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what else are you passionate about at the moment then? What's we asked this yesterday. I was at an event yesterday and it was like, we all care about many things. And we can sometimes spread ourselves so thinly because we care about so many things. But it's always interesting when we went round the circle yesterday. I was facilitating, and it was just say one word. And what word? When we have to really narrow down a focus that is really alive for you.
Mm. I feel like I want to take a play on that question and say life. What's
Yeah.
alive for me? Um, because I guess I'm like looking at the sort of core common thread of what drives everything that I do. And I do like it's like you were saying, like there's too many things. Like I'm a systems change strategist and network weaver across domain, scale, context, and horizon with time horizon. So that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. And like discerning what to spend my time on is it's a lot about emergence, it's a lot about relevance and urgency, and there are things that I want to do and I just don't have time for because this other thing is probably more important at this moment. But then, things shift, situations change, you kind of like learn to flow. Um, and so in a way, it's sort of like keeping that core guiding star or strategic direction clear, and then almost just sensing into what's happening and really like I've never really lived emergence before like I am now, and it's really empowering and invigorating because you just get to like things you don't really have to like force anything, but you do get to like exert your agency in a specific place and watch it contribute to something actively changing, like right in front of your eyes. So like when I'm looking at all these decisions and like, where do I spend my time? What do I want to spend my energy on within my portfolio, like right here, right now? It's sort of like being in service to life and the flourishing of life. Um, and all the different dimensions. So like human experience, more than human experience, relationships and mutual thriving and how the non-living interact with the living and what does that mean? The first principles, philosophical questions, and sort of Socratic mindset that underpins everything that we're experiencing now. Yeah, it's all sort of driven by that. Um, because otherwise it's like my question, like essentially the question is how big can I make this umbrella? And how can I fit more in there? The answer is always yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, for all you are doing. And that's what we really just have to acknowledge those of us that have stepped up and gone, like, I'm here, I'm willing. What can I do to really help at this time? And so I recognize in you that you are one of these people that are thinking outside of the box, are fluid in that, adapting to what the world needs right now. So thank you so much, Braden, for coming on and just having this little chat about life and solutions and what we are passionate and what we feel is so needed at this time. So I will put a link to Braden at the end of this so you can see more about her and what it means to be a radical free agent. And so thank you so much for coming on, Braden.
Thanks for discussing all of this with me and thanks for sharing my work as well. I really appreciate it, and let's do it again sometime.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.